All right, so today we're diving into something huge.
Huge is an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about empires.
Empires.
And not just, the ancient history stuff,
right.
but like their real impact on us today.
Yeah. It's wild how much we still live with today from empires.
Yeah, and we tend to think of empires as these things of the past,
Right. Gone extinct.
like dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. Like brutal regimes that just crumbled.
But what if I told
No
you
specs-
that empires are actually the norm,
Okay.
not the exception
Really?
in human history?
I mean, they're big in the history books, but I wouldn't say they're the norm now.
Right, but for most of the last 2,500 years,
Well, okay.
most people lived under some form of empire.
Wow.
So this deep dive we're doing,
Okay.
it's really about exploring this fact that most people don't even really think about.
It's true. I mean, you don't wake up thinking about living under an emperor.
Exactly. So we're going to look at why empires were so successful for so long
Okay.
and the impact they still have on us.
Sounds fascinating.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
right.
we've got to define what an empire even is.
Yes, big point.
Because it's more than just a powerful king or queen.
It's way more. You're right. We can't just throw that word around without really getting what it means.
Yeah.
We often think military strength.
Right.
Huge armies.
Land.
Yeah, tons of land.
But the real ingredients of an empire are a little more complex.
Yeah, you've got to go deeper.
Yeah.
At its core, an empire controls lots of different people.
Okay, different cultures.
Cultures.
Languages.
The whole shebang and their borders.
Yeah, what about their borders?
Always moving.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, constantly expanding. Always hungry for more.
So it's less about, like, a set size and more about this desire to grow.
Exactly.
To have influence over as many people as possible.
You got it.
Even if those people are really different from each other.
Especially if they're different. That's the point of an empire. You bring all these different people under one rule.
It's like this thirst that can never be quenched.
It's a pretty good way to put it.
And it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that empires were just a Western thing.
Right, like the Romans.
The Romans, exactly.
But that's just one part of the story.
So tell me more.
We'll take the Persian Empire, for example.
Okay.
Under Cyrus the Great.
Cyrus the Great.
Now, this was a vast empire.
How vast are we talking?
From the Mediterranean all the way to the Indus River.
Wow.
Talk about a diverse group of people.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It really shows you how empires were popping up all over the place.
Not just in one corner of the world.
Exactly. And then you have the Chinese dynasties.
Oh, yeah, the dynasty.
Emperors claiming the mandate of heaven.
The what?
Mandate of heaven, basically saying they had the divine right to rule.
Oh, wow.
Over all under heaven.
All under heaven. So basically
the whole world as they knew it.
Wow, talk about ambitious.
Right. Talk about ambition.
But with ambition often comes a darker side.
That's the thing about empires.
Yeah.
They rarely rise peacefully.
So let's be honest.
Let's be real.
Most empires were built on violence, oppression.
It's kind of a brutal truth.
It is. It's the foundation of many empires.
Even those that are remembered for their advancements, like the
Yeah.
Roman Empire.
Exactly. The Romans, they gave us so much in terms of law,
Engineering.
art,
But
but they were brutal in their conquests.
their rise to power was paved with.
Blood
Yeah.
and the destruction of Numantia,
Numantia.
small city in Spain, they resisted Rome, and the Romans destroyed them.
Wow.
It's a dark reminder that behind those impressive achievements lies a lot of suffering.
So we have this paradox.
Exactly.
Empires are capable of both.
Brutal conquest.
Yeah.
And fostering this incredible exchange of culture and ideas.
It's like this weird mix of destruction and creation. A very strange brew.
And it's hard to reconcile those two things.
It's incredibly complex.
It makes you think about cause and effect.
Because without those conquests,
Yeah.
would we have the same spread of languages and ideas?
It's true. Like, think about the languages we speak.
Right.
English, Spanish, Arabic.
All spread through empires.
It's like this double-edged sword.
Definitely a double-edged sword.
Progress, but also...
subjugation.
And this idea of cultural exchange that you mentioned.
Yes.
It wasn't just about imposing their will.
No, not always.
Empires often tried to assimilate people
Right.
into a shared identity,
They wanted everyone to feel like they belonged,
even if it was forced.
even if it wasn't always a choice.
But how did that play out in practice?
That's where things get really
It
interesting.
sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It could get pretty messy.
I bet.
Imagine living in a Roman territory.
Okay.
Generations after Rome conquered it.
Okay.
You might speak Latin in the marketplace.
To get by.
Right, to do business. But at home, at home.
You're probably speaking your native language.
Right.
Clinging to your tradition.
So you're caught between two worlds.
Exactly.
You're stuck.
You're never fully belonging to either.
It must have been incredibly isolating.
And did that struggle for belonging?
That feeling of being caught.
Did that continue?
It never really went away.
Even in modern times?
Especially in modern times.
Really?
Think about Gandhi thrown off a segregated train in South Africa.
That wasn't he.
He had a British education.
Right.
Dressed in Western attire.
So even that?
Even that wasn't enough.
Wow.
It shows you how deeply rooted this legacy of empire is.
And this struggle for equality.
Within a system that wasn't designed for you.
It makes you question whether...
What?
Whether you can ever truly erase those lines.
The lines drawn by conquest?
Yeah, the power imbalances.
It's a question that haunts us to this day.
And it leads to a really important question.
Have we really moved past empires, though? Like, really?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? With globalization, the world's so interconnected. Are empires still even relevant?
That's what's so fascinating about all this. Some scholars are saying we're living through this era of decolonization.
Okay.
Which you'd think means empires are over.
Right.
But then they go on to say that globalization, economic interdependence, climate change, all these things might actually be setting the stage for a whole new kind of empire.
Really?
A global one.
Wow.
Without those clear borders we're used to.
So what would that even look like, a modern empire? Could we even recognize it?
That's the thing. It might be way more subtle.
Subtle?
Yeah, woven into the fabric of our lives.
Okay, so give me an example.
Instead of armies and borders, think economic systems, cultural trends, things like that.
So we're talking
influence.
Okay.
Not through brute force,
right,
but through things we maybe don't even notice.
Like what?
Think about how dominant some languages are.
Yep.
How Hollywood movies tell stories that the whole world watches.
Yeah.
Or how much we depend on a few big tech companies.
To even talk to each other.
Exactly.
So it's like, instead of troops and treaties, this new empire uses trade deals and streaming services.
And maybe even internet memes, you could say.
Wow. That's kind of creepy when you put it that way. Makes you wonder if this influence has always been a part of empires.
Oh, absolutely. From the very beginning. Take the Akkadian Empire.
I haven't heard of that one.
One of the first empires ever. They created this model of rule that lasted for centuries.
What was it based on?
It was about more than just military power.
Okay.
They understood the importance of cultural influence, spreading their language, their beliefs.
So it was a sneakier approach.
In a way, you could say that.
And was this something that other empires adopted?
Oh, yeah, even Cyrus the Great.
The guy from the Persian Empire.
That's the one he incorporated a lot of those Akkadian ideas.
But I thought he was different.
He was definitely a different kind of ruler.
More benevolent, right?
He wanted people to believe he ruled for their own good. He even allowed the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem.
Really?
Yeah, he even gave them resources to rebuild their temple.
Wow, that's pretty surprising for an emperor.
Right. It shows you how complex these figures could be.
But this idea of ruling for your own good?
Yeah.
That's a pretty common story, isn't it? Empires throughout history have used that to justify their power.
Oh, absolutely.
The Romans had their whole thing about civilizing the barbarians.
Exactly. And the Chinese dynasties had the mandate of heaven.
Right. To bring order to the world.
It's a classic power move. Create a narrative that makes you seem like the good guy.
Even if you're conquering people left and right.
Exactly.
But you're saying Cyrus was different.
He was more about integration.
Integration.
He didn't want to just conquer and impose. He actively brought elements of the cultures he conquered into the Persian Empire.
So instead of erasing those cultures, he absorbed them.
In a way, you could say that.
That's a very different approach to empire building.
It's definitely more about building loyalty.
Creating a sense of shared identity.
Even if it's not entirely genuine.
Right, because it's still an empire.
Exactly. But it shows you how these things could evolve.
And it wasn't just Cyrus who did this. Think about the Roman Empire.
Right.
It wasn't just togas and gladiators.
Not at all.
They were influenced by Greek philosophy, Egyptian art.
They took inspiration from all over.
It was this huge blend of cultures.
Exactly. A melting pot.
And we see that same pattern throughout history.
The Abbasid Caliphate.
Okay.
They brought together Persian, Greek, and Arab traditions, creating this center of learning and culture.
It's amazing how much of what we think of as culture today was shaped by this process of empires blending together different traditions.
It's true, and it wasn't always pretty.
Right, because that blending wasn't always voluntary.
Definitely not for the people being conquered. It meant having to adapt.
To new languages, new religions.
Everything.
It must have been a lot to handle.
Imagine being a man in Iberia.
Iberia.
Modern-day Spain and Portugal. Generations after the Romans conquered it. You speak Latin in public, but in private, you still cling to your Celtic language.
Wow.
You build your villa in the Roman style, but you mourn the loss of your ancestors' traditions.
That feeling of being caught between two worlds.
Of trying to find your place in a world that's been turned upside down.
Man, it must have been so disorienting.
And it's a struggle that didn't end with the Roman Empire.
You're saying we're still dealing with that today?
Absolutely. Think about immigrant communities.
Okay.
Indigenous populations, even just individuals within multicultural societies.
They're all trying to navigate these different cultural identities.
Exactly, trying to find that balance.
It's like this echo of empire.
A legacy that continues to shape our lives.
It makes you think about all the empires that have risen and fallen, and how that shaped the world we live in.
And the world we're going to live in.
It's true. It's not just about the past.
Not at all.
It's like this echo.
An echo through time.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder about the ethics of it all.
Yeah, the morality of empires is a tough one.
Because it's easy to condemn them. The violence, the exploitation.
It's impossible to ignore that side of it.
Right, all the injustice.
The suffering that went into building these empires.
But then you look around, and so much of what we call culture today, our language is art. Even the way we think about law.
It's all rooted in empires.
It's a complicated thing to process.
It really is.
Take India, for example. They fought for independence from Britain after centuries of oppression and inequality.
A long and difficult struggle.
But the country that emerged from that, their institutions, their legal system, even their love for cricket, all influenced by the British Empire.
It's a tangled web.
It really is. How do we even begin to reconcile that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, how can we acknowledge the harm caused by empires without erasing all the cultural richness that exists today?
It's about finding that balance. Recognizing that it's not black and white.
So where do we even start?
Well, our sources suggest that we start by acknowledging the complexity.
The complexity?
Yeah, we can't just divide history into good and bad.
Right, because it's all intertwined.
Exactly. And as inheritors of this legacy, we carry that complexity within us.
So it's not about condoning what empires did.
Right.
But recognizing that their influence is part of who we are.
It's about understanding how we got here.
So that we can address the inequalities that still exist today.
Exactly. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it.
So if empires have been this constant force, shaping and reshaping the world, what does that mean for us? Are we doomed to repeat those mistakes?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some scholars are saying we might be on the verge of a new kind of empire.
A new kind of empire? But how?
Not one with armies and physical borders, but one built on interconnectedness.
So more like a global system.
Exactly, a new world order.
But who would be in control?
That's what we have to figure out.
It's like we're living in this in-between time.
Between empires, maybe?
Where the old rules are gone.
And the new ones haven't been written yet.
It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Definitely keeps things interesting.
That's for sure. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Time flies when you're talking about empires.
It really does, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yes, join the discussion.
Head over to our website or find us on social media. Let's keep exploring these ideas together.
Because the more we understand the past, the better equipped we'll be to face the future.
And who knows, maybe even shape that future for the better.
Here's hoping.
Until next time, happy deep diving.